Hi all, this is Skate, and I've just got access to update 5.5, and there is a whole host of good news, bad news situations coming. So I thought I'd start with a good news situation. There's 3 new tanks coming. We've seen them advertised on Wargaming social media previously, but they're finally coming. There's 3 new, massive, super heavy German tanks on their way. So we're going to look at these 3 monstrosities first. And then I'm going to make another video on the rest of the fun stuff, i.e. the big tech tree change. So be expecting a lot of content on the channel this week. There's a lot to cover. I still need to do a Mad Games video. Wanted to do it prior, but being as I was traveling, I missed the early access for that, so I could make a video in advance, but I still want to make a video on it nonetheless. I still have my pattern to do, my 113 to do, update 5.53 new tanks here, and the tech tree changes, the dreaded tech tree changes. But that's all to come this week and early next week. The tanks twirling around the screen at the moment and momentarily ago are the VK100.01 P at tier 8, the Mauschen at tier 9, and the tier 10 VK72.01. And this is how they fit into the tech tree. So, you'll see that the VK72.01 has replaced the mouse in its tier 10 position, following on from the mother-in-law, the VK4502B, and from the Tiger P, the VK01 drops off as an alternative to the Mauschen, which nicely leads onto the mouse. In other words, it's time to start grinding XP in the Tiger P and the VK4502B to get access to these tanks. Now I'm going to run through each tank very, very quickly. I've got some gameplay in the tier 9 and the tier 10, but sadly, due to lack of people on this server, I was unable to get any game content on the VK100.01 P, the tier 8, which we're looking at right now. And it pretty much plays like a mouse, just a little bit, well, a lot less armor. The cheeks are weaker, and there's a massive cupola on this thing. So the playstyle is very much the same. You need to hug it into buildings, and preferably you need to do it on a side where your cupola isn't glaringly obvious every time you poke out. Now the cheeks are a weak point on it, but they're a lot smaller than the mouse cheeks due to the tapered angle on the turret. But run through some statistics very quickly and I can show you a quick bit of movement in it. Surprisingly, it has pretty good traverse for such a big tank. It's capped at 20 kilometers per hour, which is very disappointing and very slow. It's like the British tank destroyer line, but it carries a 128mm gun with 220mm of penetration and 460 alpha with that AP. It also has heat, and the HE packs 600 alpha. I'm actually really looking forward to this one, and the Mauschen, and the VK72.01. I think they're all going to be good fun. So yeah, you start with a 10.5, and then you're going to have to grind your way through to the 128cm big gun on this thing. So yeah, look, you can see what I mean about the cheeks. They are a weak point on this, just like they are on the mouse, but they're a lot smaller because of the way it tapers in. And obviously the lower plate's going to be a weakness, and that huge cupola. So when you side scrape in, well, there you go, you can see the cheeks a bit clearer now, and the shot trap just underneath the turret. But yeah, angle it up from this side, and you can see that cupola is just going to get shot at all day long, every single day. So if you're trying to angle out from a building or a wall, try and do it this side, and you'll hide that cupola and make it a much harder target to deal with, obviously turning your turret away as well. As I mentioned, no gameplay on this one, I'm afraid, but here is just a very quick perspective for you on what its mobility is like. Seeing numbers written down on a piece of paper is not always the same as actually seeing it moving. And it does only have a 20km/h top speed, but even going uphill, you can see I'm not losing a lot of speed, and that's thanks to the 1300 plus brake horsepower on the engine. And then if you look at the traverse, for such a big tank, that's not shabby. That's actually pretty damn good. You can certainly keep up with mediums trying to circle one of these, because let's be fair, you see something a mouse size, you're going to think, oh yeah, that's an easy circle, and you're going to be very shocked. Has got a very, very long reload, but it has got 460 alpha. Fully equipped, like I have it here, your reload's 14.3 seconds, which is going to bring your DPM to 1930, which isn't the greatest. But then again, you've got masses of armor Or another way to look at it is an IS-3, as an example, has 1,965 damage per minute, which is pretty much on par with this thing. And this has oodles more armor. I mean, yeah. Look at the situation here. This is how you're going to be using the tank ideally. You're going to be parking it up like this, and you're going to be trying to side scrape, and you're going to be reversing out, taking shots, pulling back in, turning your turret straight. Doing it this side of the building, though, I've screwed myself, because my cupola is huge, and it's easily penned and easily accessible by pretty much most guns. If I do this on the other side of the building, though, this tank is all of a sudden really challenging. And then we're going to skip straight on to the Tier 9 Mauschen. You can see two sets of tracks on either side of this tank, and it just looks like a mouse, just with a nasty big cupola on top, and a bit flatter, a little bit smaller. Stats on the screen at the moment: this thing packs two 128mm guns, the top gun 246mm of penetration with 460 alpha. The armor 240 on the front of the turret, 160 on the sides, and 150 on the rear. Check that out though, 1,700 brake horsepower. That's an impressive figure. I mean, like, really impressive. Hull armor, by the way, a little bit less on the front, 200, 155 on the sides, and 135 on the rear. Still very good figures, especially when you consider the angle. But you've again got to then consider that massive weak spot on top. Oh, and Tier 9 with 2,000 hit points. That's quite tasty. Here is a very, very quick example game. Sadly, it is a quick example game because I got into a game on the test server with a grand total of 3 other people. So before we dive into some gameplay, you'll see the reload is 12.6 seconds fully equipped, which gives you 2,190 damage per minute. Not massive DPM, there's things at this tier with over 3,000. But again, you've got to consider the armor layout on this thing, and you've got to consider that alpha per shot. The thing I like most, though, is if you know how to play a mouse, you know how to play a VK100.01 you know how to play a Mauschen. The only difference is you've got to be very, very conscious to where you're shooting, quite simply. I mean, the turret, it's good, but it has got that weak spot on top. You'll notice I'm not shooting the weak spot on top on that VK directly ahead. The reason being, I wanted to test how easy it is to penetrate the front cheeks. Surprisingly, quite hard to hit in a tank like this, but in terms of mobility, again, the Mauschen, not too bad. The IS-8 is known for its mobility as a heavy tank at Tier 8. And now I have got assistance from the tank behind me, the FCM50T, but we're really not having issues with this IS-8 in the slightest. We're just getting penetrated by the VK over there. And again, we're going to go for the turret cheek. We're either hitting the gun or we're hitting the cheek, which isn't faced towards us and is taping off to the side of us. But you can see I'm trying to look away. That is actually the downside of the Mauschen, is the cheek. Yeah, they're premium rounds, but nonetheless, the cheeks on this are bigger than they are on that VK over there. Now this is the sort of position you actually want to put your tank in. The Mauschen is godly in this sort of position. If you look, my cupola is now hidden by that rock. He can see my tank, he can't see the hull on it, he can only see the left cheek. And he can only see the left cheek at the angle I want to see, or I want him to see it at. So he's not getting those cupola shots in, and as long as you angle up correctly, he's not getting any other shots in. As it stands now, there's no point waiting around, might as well just go in and see if we can get one more penetrating shot in on this tank. And we do, above the tracks, just like on the mouse. There's spaced armor on the tracks. You've got more likelihood of penetrating the upper hull on these things than you do the lower hull. Only a quick example, but nonetheless I think it gives a good example of the gameplay. But moving on. This is the VK72.01 K. It is the new Tier 10 German. And it's quite nice. I mean, look at the size on it. The armor on this thing is insane as well. There are some snags to that armor, which we're going to run through very quickly now, but in general, it's very well armored. It looks like a side scraper, but you may potentially struggle with the side scraping, and I'll go through that in a second. Have a quick look at the stats on paper. 2,100 hit points, 240 mil of frontal hull armor, 160 on the sides, 120 on the rear. The turret is very well rounded, much like the Lervas, and it has 200 mil all around the front. All sounding very good so far, but the sides aren't flat. In terms of the gun, by the way, we're pretty much looking at an E100 gun. 250 mil of penetration on the AP with 640 alpha. The HE has 85mm of penetration and does 960 alpha. For a tank this well armoured or this big, its gun felt very nice. And again, surprisingly, very surprisingly, mobility wasn't too bad either, as you're about to see. She has a top speed of 30 km per hour. Combine that with the 1,320 brake horsepower, you're getting yourselves 26 degrees of track traverse without all the extra consumables, equipment, etc., and 21 degrees of turret traverse. Again, very little in terms of players in this game. Very little I do in this game as well. But there's a couple of quick examples which highlight exactly what makes this tank good and what makes this tank bad. You'll notice my reload fully equipped is 15.6 seconds. That gives me a damage per minute of 2,461. In perspective, which is obviously going to be the main obvious thing to compare to, E100, same gun. Slightly less DPM than the E100. Only by about 200 though, so it's not the end of the world. Aim time is very slightly better than the E100 than it is on this thing. This thing also has 7 degrees of gun depression, and it has the same gun dispersion as the E100, 0.362. Now, this is what I wanted to talk about on the armor. When you're angled up like he is now, it's a very, very hard target. The turret is very strong because of the shape on it, and the sides, you'll notice the front is very strong. But look around the turret, that becomes very rounded, which translates to, if you over-angle this thing when you're side scraping, that area right below the turret, which is shaped, is a very, very easy pen. And that takes this from what looks like a monster side scraper to a tank which has a big flaw when you over-angle it, which makes the tank a little bit awkward. But you can still do it, you can still side scrape a little bit, just not as well. Here's the surprising part. I can keep up with the Leo as he's circling me. Wasn't expecting that. Yeah, he was doing a bit of a large circle, but I think medium tanks are potentially going to struggle coming up against this thing. I watched that section of the replay a few times just so I could get a good idea on it, but if you watch it again, you'll notice that my gun was catching up very, very easily. So even if he was doing a large circle, my gun was rotating faster than he was. That's something you wouldn't expect for a tank like this. Now remember, this is a test server, so there is a possibility that things are going to change on this tank. It could get buffed a little, it could get nerfed a little. However, what we find is in the vast majority of cases in the test client, except for the tech tree changes, the vast majority of tanks which have gone through testing aren't going to change from this point until they come into the game, because this is the last iteration before coming into the game. Oh, before I forget very quickly, the VK100.01 and the Mauschen both have 8 degrees of gun depression, just like the mouse. But that's it for this video. 3 new German monsters coming to the game. I'm really excited to play these ones, and I'm going to be out in my Tiger P a lot, and my VK4502B a lot, because I want these tanks an awful lot. I hope you've enjoyed this quick peek. It is only a quick peek, sadly I can't get any more in-depth gameplay, etc, etc, but I hope you've enjoyed it. Thank you all for watching, and I will catch you in the next one, which will be very soon and will be all about these massive tech tree changes. Bye-bye.